Alarms tore through my cockpit before I even saw the rock coming. My hauler shook so hard my teeth rattled, and a chunk of stone the size of a house spun past my window close enough that I could count the cracks on its surface. I pulled the stick hard to the left, engines screaming, and felt my stomach drop as the ship rolled through a gap that should have been too narrow to fit through. My name is Daniel, and I fly salvage runs through the Kello Belt, a graveyard of broken asteroids that never stops moving. That day the belt had turned angry. A mining charge had gone off somewhere deep inside the field hours earlier, and now everything was drifting, colliding, breaking apart in slow, deadly motion. I had no business being out there. But a distress ping had come through on an old frequency nobody used anymore, and something about the shape of that signal, weak and stubborn at the same time, made me turn my ship toward it instead of away. Another rock clipped my hull and sent sparks across my display. Warning lights bloomed red across the console. I forced myself to breathe and counted the gaps between the tumbling stones, the way my old flight instructor taught me, treating the chaos like a puzzle instead of a wall of death. 3 seconds, turn. 2 seconds, dive. The ship groaned every time I asked it to bend past what it was built for, but it held. Then I saw her ship. It hung sideways in a pocket of open space, half swallowed by shadow, one whole side torn open like a can peeled by a giant hand. Sparks drifted out of the wound in slow, lazy arcs, freezing the instant they touched vacuum. The distress signal was coming from inside that wreck, and whoever sent it had maybe minutes of air left, if that. I did not have time to think about the danger of docking with a ship that broken, in a field that was still falling apart around us. I just did it. I lined up my hauler with the wound in her hull, fired the docking clamps, and felt the jolt as metal met metal harder than I meant it to. The whole frame screamed in protest. I grabbed my emergency kit and pulled myself hand over hand through the twisted wreckage, my helmet light cutting through swirling dust and floating debris. Wires hung loose, sparking uselessly. A control panel had been ripped clean off its mount. And there, wedged behind a bent support beam, was a woman in a torn flight suit, her face pale, her lips already turning blue at the edges. Her eyes opened when my light hit her face. She flinched, tried to pull away, tried to say something I could not hear through the vacuum. I did not wait for her permission. I pulled the emergency seal patch from my kit, pressed it over the crack in her helmet where her air was leaking out, and watched the hiss stop. Getting her back through that wreck was the hardest thing I had done in years. The ship groaned around us the whole way, threatening to shift and trap us both. Once, a support beam came loose and swung toward my head, and I only avoided it because she grabbed my arm and yanked me sideways, with more strength than I expected from someone who could barely stand. By the time we reached my hauler and I sealed the airlock behind us, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely release my own helmet. She collapsed the moment the air pressure evened out. I caught her before she hit the floor and carried her to the small medical bay at the back of my ship, a cramped space I had built myself out of spare parts over the years, never expecting to actually need it for a person instead of a busted engine part. Her name, I would learn later, was Ivy. But in that first hour, I did not know her name at all. I only knew her pulse was too fast, her skin too cold, and that every alarm on my ship was still screaming because the asteroid field had not stopped trying to kill us just because I had stopped paying attention to it. A rock the size of a car slammed into my hull while I was still hooking her up to the oxygen line. The impact threw me against the wall hard enough to bruise my shoulder. I scrambled back to the cockpit, strapped in with one hand still smeared with disinfectant, and pulled the ship into a hard climb to get us above the worst of the debris. My hauler was never built for aggressive flying. It was built for slow, careful cargo runs. That day I flew it like a fighter jet, and I am still not sure how the frame did not tear apart around me. By the time I broke free of the belt and hit open empty space, my hands would not stop shaking. I set the ship on a slow drift, locked the controls, and went back to check on my passenger. Ivy was awake, barely. Her eyes tracked me across the room, wary, like she was trying to decide if I was another danger she needed to survive. I understood that look. Out here, plenty of people who claim to help are really just looking for something to take. You're safe, I told her, keeping my voice low and even. My ship, my rules. And my only rule is that nobody gets left behind. You're not going to be a passenger I forget about. I promise you that." She did not answer. She just watched me, judging, the way you judge a stranger who has already saved your life once, but has not yet earned your trust. I did not push. I set out water, checked her vitals, and left her to rest. It took 2 days before she spoke a full sentence to me. Her voice was rough, quiet, careful. "Why did you come back for me? Nobody flies into a collapsing field for a stranger." I told her the truth. I said the signal sounded like someone who refused to give up, and that felt like something worth answering. She studied my face for a long moment, like she was checking if I meant it, and then she looked away and said nothing else. Her ship was gone. What was left of it drifted somewhere in the belt behind us, too damaged to matter to anyone but the scrap collectors, who would eventually pick it apart for parts. She had nothing left except the suit on her back and whatever she carried in her mind. I offered her the only thing I had, which was space on my ship and time to figure out what came next. She took 3 days to leave the medical bay on her own. When she finally did, she found me in the cargo hold, elbow deep in the guts of my hauler's damaged coolant system, cursing under my breath at a valve that refused to seal. "You are doing that wrong," she said. I looked up, surprised to hear her voice sound almost steady. "Excuse me? That valve. You are forcing it. It needs to be turned counter to the flow first, or it will crack under the pressure difference." She crossed her arms. I was an engineer before all this. Ships were my life. I handed her the tool without arguing, mostly out of curiosity, and watched her hands move with a confidence that told me she was not exaggerating. Within a minute the valve sealed clean. No leaks, no cracks. I sat back on my heels and looked at her properly for the first time since pulling her out of that wreck. "Looks like I owe you one," I said. "You already saved my life. I think we are even, or close to it." That was the first time I saw something close to a smile cross her face. It did not last long, but it was there. Over the next week, we fell into something like a rhythm. She helped me patch the damage my ship had taken flying through the belt, and in exchange I taught her the routes I knew, the safe lanes through dangerous space that most salvagers guarded like secrets. She was sharp, quick to learn, quicker to argue when she thought I was wrong, which happened more often than I liked to admit. I found myself looking forward to those arguments. My ship had been quiet for a long time before she came aboard. I had gotten used to eating alone, sleeping alone, working through problems with nobody to bounce ideas off. Having her voice fill the silence felt strange at first, and then it felt like something I did not want to lose. She told me, slowly, in pieces, what had happened to her ship. She had been running supplies through the belt for a small trading company when her navigation system failed during a routine crossing. The company she worked for did not send anyone to look for her. They wrote her off as a loss and moved on, because sending a rescue ship into that field cost more than she was worth to them. She had been drifting for 6 days before I found her, rationing air, watching her instruments die one by one, wondering if anyone was even looking. I did not have a good response to that. I just told her that where I came from, you did not leave people behind, because the math said it was not worth it. She looked at me for a long time after that, like she was trying to decide if people like me actually existed, or if I was just saying what she wanted to hear. 3 weeks after I pulled her out of the wreck, trouble found us again. We were running a supply route through a quieter stretch of space, nothing like the belt, when my scanners picked up 2 ships closing in fast from behind. Not traders, not rescue crews. The kind of ships that painted over their registration numbers and carried weapons they were not supposed to have. Raiders. The kind that took ships apart for parts and did not much care whether the crew survived the process. "Daniel!" Ivy's voice was tight, sharp, all business. "Those engines are running hot. They have been chasing something, or someone, and they are gaining on us." I pushed my hauler as fast as it would go, which was not fast enough. My ship was built for hauling scrap, not for outrunning trouble. The gap between us and the raider ships closed steadily, no matter what I tried. "We cannot outrun them," Ivy said, already moving to the secondary console, hands flying across controls with a speed that told me she had done this kind of thing before. "But we might be able to outsmart them. Get us near that debris field on your scanner, the one at 2 o'clock. I did not ask questions. I trusted her instincts the same way she had trusted my flying weeks earlier when I pulled her out of the wreck. I turned the ship toward the scattered field of broken satellite parts and dead machinery drifting ahead of us, an old shipping graveyard nobody had bothered to clear. "Cut your engines the moment we cross the first cluster," she said. "Let us drift. If we are lucky, their sensors will lose us in all that metal." It was a wild plan, the kind that could easily get us both killed if it failed. But her voice did not waver, and I realized somewhere in those 3 weeks, I had started trusting her judgment as much as my own. I killed the engines the second we crossed into the debris field, and the ship went dark and silent, drifting on momentum alone. The raider ships roared past us, engines blazing, sensors sweeping blind through the metal clutter. For 30 seconds that felt like 30 years, we sat in total silence, watching their lights arc away from us into open space. Then they were gone, chasing a signal that was not there anymore, and I finally let myself breathe. "That was insane," I whispered. "That was engineering," Ivy said, and this time her smile stayed a little longer. We restarted the engines once we were sure the raiders were far enough away, and I set a new course, one that avoided their last known heading entirely. My hands were still shaking on the controls, adrenaline draining out of me slowly, when Ivy sat down in the co-pilot seat beside me. It was the first time she had chosen to sit there, instead of standing near the door, ready to retreat. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for today, for not leaving me out there, for not treating me like something you rescued and now own. Most people are not like that." "I know what it is like to be forgotten," I told her, surprising myself with how easily the words came out. "Long before I found you drifting in that field, I spent years flying alone because I did not think anyone wanted to stick around a scrap hauler with dirty hands and no fixed address. You are the first person in a long time who did not look at that and walk away." She did not say anything right away. She just reached over and rested her hand on top of mine, still resting on the throttle, and for a while, neither of us said a word. The stars moved past the window in slow, silent lines, and for the first time since I could remember, the silence on my ship did not feel empty at all. We spent the following months finishing repairs, not just to my ship, but to a new one we started building together out of salvage we picked up along our routes. Piece by piece, panel by panel, we turned scrap metal into something that was fully hers again, a ship built with her own hands and my own sweat, carrying both our names painted small on the side of the hull where nobody else would think to look. The day we finished it, she stood back and looked at the finished ship glowing under the work lights of my cargo bay, hands on her hips, a grin on her face that I had never seen before. "It flies," she said. "It actually flies. Told you it would." "You told me a lot of things. Most of them turned out true, which is rare for a man who talks as much as you do." I laughed, and she laughed with me, and for a moment, the whole cargo bay felt lighter than it had in years. She could have taken that ship and flown off on her own after that. She had every right to. Instead, she stayed docked beside mine, and when I asked her why, she said something I still think about. "You spent weeks fixing something broken because you refused to believe it was beyond saving. Nobody had ever done that for me before, not with a ship, and not with anything else either. I am not in a hurry to leave that behind. We still fly the Kello belt sometimes, though never during a collapse if we can help it. Ivy pilots her own ship now, flying beside mine instead of inside it, but we run the same routes, answer the same kind of signals, refuse to leave anyone behind if we can reach them in time. The silence that used to fill my cockpit is gone. In its place there is a voice on the comms every single run, sharp, steady, and never far away. I went looking for a distress signal one dangerous afternoon, in a dying asteroid field, expecting nothing more than another salvage job. I found a woman who had been left behind by everyone who was supposed to care, and somewhere between fixing her ship and dodging raiders, and drifting silent through a field of broken metal, she found a way to fix the parts of me that had been broken for far longer than her hull ever was. I still do not know which one of us did the harder repair job. I only know that neither of us is drifting alone anymore.